Red Hollow baked beneath a punishing sun, its red dust streets winding like dried veins between squat buildings and brittle fences. The canyon wind spoke more often than the people did, whispering through rock and ruin, carrying stories older than the graveyard that stretched behind the chapel. On a hill overlooking that chapel stood Eliza McCrae, black dress fluttering against the harsh wind, eyes as hollow as the town that bore its name. A simple pine box lay before her, the last of her family beneath its lid. Her son Jacob, 12 years old, freckles like rust, gone in smoke and flame. Her husband Thomas, strong hands, patient voice, reduced to ash trying to save their boy. The barn fire had taken them both, lit in the night, like the devil himself had struck a match. Folks whispered it wasn't an accident. Eliza didn't need the whispers to know. The way the fire spread, quick and cruel, and the boot prints in the morning soot. None of it made sense unless someone had wanted them dead. After the burial, the townsfolk drifted off, eyes downcast. Sheriff Moore offered a nod, but not a word. He was a tired man, afraid of stirring what couldn't be stopped. The Dunley boys had been carving a path through the frontier, taking land, burning out settlers, leaving lawmen in their pockets or in the dirt. And Thomas McCrae, stubborn as he was, hadn't paid them tribute when they came knocking. Eliza returned to the ranch alone. The ground cracked beneath her boots, the silence louder than grief. The barn was a skeleton now, all char and twist, and the house still stank of smoke, no matter how many windows she opened. She slept in short fits, rifle cradled in her arms, waking to phantom creaks and coyote cries. The ranch needed fixing. There were debts to settle, fences to mend, and horses that hadn't been fed right since the fire. But her hands, once skilled at stitching shirts, milking cows, cooking for three, trembled too often now. She tried anyway, because the land was all she had left, and giving it up would be letting the Dunleys win. A week passed. Then another. One morning, she found a dead calf gutted and left on her porch. Its hide was carved with an X, deep and deliberate. She stared at it for a long time before dragging it into the scrub and burying it with her own spade. She told no one. The sheriff wouldn't help. The neighbors would only worry. And she refused to be pitted again. The third week brought a storm, black clouds rolling in over the mesas, thunder cracking like judgment. She was stacking wood against the wind when she saw him, just a shape at first, cresting the ridge astride a dark, lean horse. His coat flapped in the gale, long and dust-worn, and he rode with the ease of a man who'd seen too many roads. As he neared, she saw his face, sharp lines, gray eyes, jaw shadowed with stubble. A stranger, no doubt, but there was something in his bearing, like silence wrapped in iron. He stopped 10 paces from her gate. "Ma'am," he said, voice gravel-dry, "just need water." Eliza nodded once and pointed toward the trough. He dismounted, let his horse drink, then straightened and glanced at the barn ruins. "Fire," he said. "Not a question." "Yes." He looked at her, as if measuring something not in height or weight, but in will. Then he nodded. "Got a tarp I could use." "Rain's coming heavy." She hesitated. "I've got the barn. What's left of it?" "That'll do." He slept there that night, bedroll laid on scorched dirt. Eliza kept the rifle nearby, but something in his calm, in the way he made no excuses and asked for nothing more, settled her nerves. At dawn, she found him already working, dragging loose fence posts back into place, tying wire with clean, efficient movements. He didn't speak much, just worked, sweat glistening at his temples. "Don't expect to be paid," she said, wary. He shook his head. "Wasn't." "Then why help?" He paused, looked past her to the hill where 2 rough crosses still stood. Sometimes, folks need help more than they admit. She didn't ask more. They spent the day repairing what little they could. When the rain hit, they sheltered beneath a canvas stretched between half-collapsed rafters. She offered him coffee and a heel of bread. He took both with a quiet nod. "I never caught your name," she said. "You didn't." That was all he gave. And yet, she didn't mind the silence. It was a different kind than the one that had settled after her family's death. His silence was steady, solid. Not absence, but presence. That night, he lit a fire pit near the barn, more for comfort than warmth. She watched from her porch, rifle beside her, a shawl wrapped tight. He didn't glance her way, just stared into the flames like they held some truth he couldn't quite read. The next morning, she found her tools organized, her porch swept. No note, no sign of him, just his tracks, leading back out into the dust. She thought that was the end of it, until 3 nights later, the wind howled differently, sharp wrong. Her mare stamped nervously in the stable. When she stepped outside, lantern in hand, she found another message. A knife embedded in her doorframe, the hilt smeared with red clay, and the words, "Last Chance," carved into the blade. She pulled it free with shaking hands and turned toward the ridge. And there, just visible under the starlight, sat the same rider, motionless on his horse. He raised a hand once, then disappeared into the canyon's dark. The stranger returned before the next sun rose. Eliza spotted him as she poured water for the chickens, his silhouette cutting through morning haze like a memory she'd dreamed but never spoken aloud. He rode in with no fanfare, same long coat, same unbothered ease, and tethered his horse without waiting for invitation. "You left," she said flatly. "I came back," he replied. That was all. He set to work as if the days between had never passed. Fixed a broken hinge on the shed, re-roped the gate, said nothing of the knife that had been stuck in her door, but when she brought him coffee, he asked, "You have enemies?" She looked down at the cup. "Don't we all out here?" He didn't push, but from then on, he slept with his back to the wall, and his rifle within reach. The rhythm of their days began to shift. Not quite comfortable. Eliza didn't believe in comfort anymore, but functional, steady. He was a man built for silence, and she found she didn't mind the quiet when he was near. He worked like he was trying to outrun something, not with speed, but with care, as if precision might keep the past from catching up. At night, they spoke in fragments. She learned his horse was called Flint, that he'd fought in some war, though he never said which, that he carried a scar on his side, shaped like a crescent moon. He never gave a name, and she never asked again. Their conversations deepened without words. He began teaching her how to reload faster, how to shoot in wind. She caught on quick. Too much loss had honed her focus like a blade. In turn, she showed him how to dry apples over the stove, how to braid rope tight enough to hold a wild colt. He complimented none of it, but he stayed. The townsfolk noticed. Riders passing through slowed to stare. Ruth from the general store whispered, "You let him live there?" Eliza simply nodded. They could think what they pleased. Let them think he was a bounty hunter, or a broken soldier, or a ghost with debts to pay. She didn't much care what stories they made of her life. But in quiet hours, she wondered. His hands were too steady for a drifter, his aim too perfect. She watched him carve notches into the edge of his rifle, but one evening, small, deliberate marks. She didn't ask what they meant, didn't need to. Then came the warning. A boy, young Micah from the outlying farm, rode in wild-eyed and shaking. Said he'd heard the Dunley boys were gathering again, camped just north of Badger's Bluff. Said one of them was talking about the widow who needed a lesson. Eliza clenched her fists and looked to the stranger. He didn't flinch. "When?" the man asked. "Soon," the boy said. "Real soon." After the boy rode off, Eliza and the stranger stood alone in the fading light. Coyotes yipped in the distance. She expected him to ride out, to disappear the way he'd come. Instead, he said, "We'll need traps." And that was that. They spent the next 2 days rigging the land, trip lines hidden beneath brush, spikes driven into fence rails, oil barrels half buried and ready to spill. He taught her how to anticipate movement, how to count shadow patterns, how to wait for the moment just before action breaks. She followed every instruction with the solemn clarity of someone who knew this might be her last fight. The nights brought thunder again, though no rain fell. Just dry lightning clawing across the black sky, and the smell of dust heavy in the air. One of those nights, after they'd finished setting the last of the alarms, they sat beneath the cracked roof of the barn. A flask passed between them. "I used to hate the quiet," Eliza said, fingers wrapped around the flask. "After they died, it was like the whole world held its breath. I thought if I made enough noise, maybe it'd come back to life." He didn't speak, just took a swig and waited. But noise never did a damn thing. Just made it worse. The silence, it's honest, at least. He nodded. You ever think about leaving? She stared out into the dark. Where would I go? This land's theirs as much as it's mine. If I leave, they vanish for good. I can't have that. A long pause. Then he said, I know what that is. Holding on to ghosts. Eliza looked at him then, and for the first time, she saw the fracture behind his eyes. Something buried, aching, and unfinished. She didn't ask. Instead, she reached across the space and laid her hand on his. He didn't move, didn't pull away. That night, while she slept with the rifle laid across her lap, she woke to footsteps on the porch. Not the heavy boots of an outlaw, but the whisper-soft step of the stranger. He stood there in the moonlight, staring toward the hills, as if waiting for something, or someone. The next morning, she found something wedged beneath his saddle blanket, a folded piece of parchment, yellowed and creased. She opened it with cautious fingers. It was a bounty poster, torn at the edges, the ink smudged, but the name printed clear, Clyde Dunley. Wanted murder, arson, extortion. The poster was marked by an unusual stamp, a federal seal, but with the initials S.B. inked beside it. Handwritten. She read it twice. Then again. It wasn't the stranger's face on the paper. It was Dunley's. But the initials, they matched a hunch. A possibility that struck like a dropped stone in a still well. She looked toward the barn. He was there, mending a stirrup, calm as ever. Eliza folded the poster and tucked it inside her coat. She didn't say a word. But from that moment forward, she watched him differently. Not with suspicion, with understanding. And something else she hadn't felt in years. Hope. The Dunley boys came at dawn as expected. 13 riders, black dust curling behind their horses like smoke from a coming hell. They rode hard, confident, hooting through the morning silence with the kind of laughter that only follows cruelty. They didn't hide their approach. They didn't need to. Red Hollow had taught them not to fear resistance. But the widow of Red Hollow was no longer alone. Eliza watched them from the upper window of her house, rifle steadied on the sill, breath slow and measured. The stranger was already in position, hidden beneath the shadow of the west ridge, his rifle aimed where the trail narrowed. His coat blended with the rock, his stillness with the wind. Clyde Dunley led the pack, silver spurs gleaming, thick mustache curled like a villain in a dime novel. He was broader than she remembered, meaner in the eyes. Behind him trailed his kin, men with dead smiles, patched coats, and fingers twitching near triggers. Their horses snorted uneasily as they neared the first trap. A tripwire snapped. 3 barrels burst from the hill, rolling fast, slicked in oil. The horses reared. One man was thrown, his head striking a fence post with a crack that silenced the laughter. Chaos bloomed. Then the stranger fired. Sharp, clean. One rider dropped, clutching his chest, the shot echoing down the canyon like thunder off stone. A second shot punched through another man's shoulder. Screams, curses, men scattering. Eliza took her chance. She squeezed the trigger. The man nearest the porch spun and fell, boots skidding in the dust. Another tried for the barn, ran straight into the concealed pit the stranger had dug the day before. He disappeared with a howl, crashing onto broken stakes below. Clyde shouted, "She's got help. Spread out. Burn it all." A rider hurled a torch toward the barn. Flames caught in dry timber, blooming red and fast. Eliza's heart clenched. Not again. The stranger moved from the ridge, firing as he ran. Quick, lethal shots that dropped 2 more riders before they knew where he was. He moved like a ghost, always 2 steps ahead, never where they aimed. Eliza sprinted outside, firing as she ran. She reached the barn with a blanket soaked in water, slapped it against the fire, smoke stinging her eyes. One of the outlaws charged from the smoke, pistol raised. The stranger stepped between them. He didn't shout, didn't hesitate. His revolver barked once. The outlaw dropped, the firelight glinting in his wide, empty eyes. More gunfire echoed through the valley. 2 of the Dunleys were retreating already, spooked and bleeding. Clyde cursed after them, then turned his fury back toward the ranch. "McCrae," he roared, "you think this stranger'll save you? You think you can hide behind a man again? Eliza stepped into the yard, rifle lowered. Her hands were shaking, but her spine stayed straight. I'm not hiding, she said. Clyde rode closer, pistol aimed lazily at her. You've made a mistake, widow. So have you, she replied. From behind the house, a rope snapped. A rig beam swung down from the eaves, slamming into Clyde's chest and knocking him clean from the saddle. Dust rose as he hit the ground, winded, weapon slipping from his grip. The stranger was on him in seconds. No bullets now, just fists, swift and brutal. Clyde swung wildly, blood flying. But the stranger moved with purpose. Every punch a memory, every strike a reckoning. Clyde was strong, but he wasn't fast. And he wasn't ready for a man who fought like vengeance had a name. The final blow cracked across Clyde's jaw, sending him sprawling into the dirt. He didn't rise. Eliza stood over him, rifle in hand. The stranger knelt, pulled a badge from beneath his coat, and held it up so she could see. Not tin, but brass, weathered and worn. Special Bureau, Federal Justice. I was tracking him for a year, he said quietly. Didn't know it would end here. Eliza looked down at Clyde's unconscious body, lip curled. He burned my family. Left my boy to scream and smoke. The stranger nodded. He'll hang. I'll see to it. She could have pulled the trigger. Could have let justice come the old way, hot and fast. But something steadier held her hand. I want him to stand trial, she said. I want his name shamed in the record books. I want the law to speak loud enough that the next bastard thinks twice before lighting a match. He rose to his feet, eyes meeting hers with something close to admiration. You're stronger than most. I have to be. The last of the Dunleys had fled, leaving their dead and wounded in the dust. Smoke curled from the edge of the barn, but the fire had been stopped. The ranch still stood. And in the wake of battle, the quiet returned, not hollow, not grieving. Clean, like the space after a storm, where something new could grow. They buried the fallen without ceremony. No prayers, just dirt and silence. The stranger packed his things the next morning, saddle heavy with the weight of duty. Eliza stood by the gate. You leaving? For now. Got to report to Carson City. Turn him in. She nodded, staring at the horizon. And after that? He mounted slowly. Maybe I ride back this way. Her eyes met his. Soft, uncertain, but open. Maybe, she said. And this time, when he rode off, she didn't feel abandoned. She felt something beginning. Spring bloomed slow in Red Hollow. The frost clung a little longer, and the wildflowers hesitated at first, like the land itself needed time to believe peace had taken root. But the days grew warmer, steadier. Life crept back in, quiet and persistent. Eliza patched the barn roof herself, repainted the porch, replaced the windows the Dunleys had shattered in their fury. Each act was deliberate, part ritual, part rebellion, proof that the fire had failed to erase her. Letters arrived now. Not often. Always folded clean and marked with a wax seal. Simple lines in plain handwriting. Updates on trials, on verdicts handed down, on justice served. Clyde Dunley hanged in Carson City. His brothers sentenced to life. Red Hollow's ghosts have names now. She kept the letters in a tin box beside her son's photograph. Then one morning, he returned. No warning, no grand entrance. Just his silhouette in the distance, moving slow through the morning light. She was kneeling in the garden, hands caked in soil, when she saw him. He dismounted without a word, tied Flint to the post like he'd never left. Eliza stood. You done chasing? He looked at her, sunlight catching the hint of a smile at the corner of his mouth. For now, they didn't embrace. They didn't need to. The silence between them was different now. Less like distance, more like understanding. He walked with her through the fields, listened as she spoke of coyotes in the hills, and the stubborn calf that wouldn't feed. She asked nothing of where he'd been. It wasn't important. That night, he slept in the house. Not on the floor. Not in the barn. In the bed beside her. It was awkward at first. Years had carved space around her, shaped her into someone hard to hold. But he was patient, and the quiet between them folded into something softer. She didn't dream of fire that night. For the first time in years, she dreamed of rain. Weeks passed. He helped with the fencing, the planting, the mending of what time and grief had worn thin. He brought books from town, new boots for her, a saddle blanket dyed in her favorite shade of indigo. She never asked for these things, but he brought them anyway. And slowly, she began to laugh again. Not often, not loud, but sometimes, at dusk, when the chickens settled and the sky turned orange, he'd tell her some absurd tale from the trail, and she'd laugh until her ribs ached. She caught herself humming once. She stopped, startled by the sound. He looked up from sharpening his knife. "That a song you knew?" She shook her head. "I think I used to sing it to my boy." He didn't speak, just nodded and went back to the blade. One evening, as thunder grumbled low over the horizon, he handed her a wrapped parcel. She unwrapped it slowly. Inside, a small iron pendant, shaped like a hawk mid-flight. "Elk iron," he said. "Forged it myself. Thought it'd suit you." She held it in her palm, weight warm against her skin. "Why a hawk? You see everything. Even when you're hurting, you don't miss a thing." She wore it from then on. Over her heart, their love wasn't like the ones from stories. There were no grand declarations, no sweeping gestures. Just two people who had buried too many names, learning how to speak without fear. He still carried his gun everywhere. She still kept a rifle by the door. But there was peace in their routine and trust in the silence. One night, as they sat on the porch watching stars bloom above the ridge, she asked the question that had waited in her throat for months. "Do you ever think about staying? For good?" He didn't answer right away. Just leaned back, arms crossed, boots propped on the rail. "I do," he said finally, "but I'm not sure the world's done needing me elsewhere." Eliza nodded, heart quiet. "And if it calls again?" "I'll ride. I always ride. But I'll come back." She looked out at the land, rough, wild, unyielding, and felt something settle inside her. "You better," she said. The next morning, he stayed. And the morning after that, and the one after. The man who had no name became the man who fixed the roof, carved new fence posts, taught local boys how to shoot straight and treat women with respect. The widow who had lost everything became the woman who planted peach trees and stitched clothes for neighbor children. Together, they were no longer shadows of loss. They were roots. The stranger never gave his full name, not even to the preacher when he finally married them beneath the cottonwood tree. But it didn't matter. Everyone in Red Hollow knew who he was. The man who came when fire threatened. The man who stayed when the ashes cooled. And Eliza, once the grieving widow, became the heartbeat of a town that had nearly died. Her strength became legend. Her love, a quiet force that steadied a wandering soul. Some nights, long after the porch light dimmed and coyotes yipped at the stars, she'd lie beside him, listening to his breath, steady as the wind through the canyons. "You ever miss the road?" she'd ask. He'd pull her close, fingers tracing the hawk at her throat. "Only when I'm not beside you." And that was the truth of it. In a land carved by hardship and scorched by loss, they had found something rare. Not just survival, but love, stitched from the ruins. Stronger than fire, wilder than fate, and it stayed.